Good morning. This is Artificially Intelligent News for Sunday, August 23rd, 2026. I'm Mark Ellison. This briefing is created with AI and independently fact-checked against current reporting and official information available as of early Sunday morning in the Eastern Time Zone. A federal judge in New York has thrown out a Trump administration policy that had suspended visa processing for people from 75 countries. U.S. District Judge Jeanette Vargas ruled Friday that the policy was contrary to law and exceeded the State Department's authority. The administration had said applicants from the affected countries were more likely to need public assistance in the United States. The list included Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, and Somalia. The ruling does not settle the wider immigration debate or undo the administration's other restrictions. It does mean the blanket suspension cannot remain in force under the judge's order. In practical terms, the decision distinguishes between the government's authority to screen individual applicants and a broad pause applied across the listed countries. The State Department said it is defending rigorous screening and vetting standards, but declined to comment on the pending case. The practical question now is whether the administration seeks a stay while it appeals. For visa applicants and families whose cases were caught in the pause, the decision could reopen a process that had been put on hold. In Washington, Chief Justice John Roberts has temporarily allowed construction to continue on President Trump's planned White House ballroom while the Supreme Court considers an emergency appeal. Lower courts had ordered an end to above-ground work, concluding that congressional approval was required. Roberts signed a short order Friday, hours before that halt was due to take effect. Such temporary orders are designed to preserve the immediate status of a dispute while the court considers an emergency request. It is not a final ruling on the project, and it does not say how the full court will decide the underlying dispute. The administration describes the project as a roughly 90,000 square foot military and ballroom complex and says it is needed for national security. Preservation advocates challenging it say the executive branch cannot proceed without Congress. Court filings say about $200 million in private donations has been spent or committed, and the administration says the project's total cost is $400 million. The case is another closely watched test of presidential power on the Supreme Court's emergency docket. For now, crews can keep working while the justices decide whether that temporary permission should last through the litigation. A consequential technology trial is continuing in federal court in Oakland, California. Meta is defending Facebook and Instagram against claims by 4 states that the company knowingly designed products that addicted children and harmed their mental health. California, Colorado, Kentucky, and New Jersey are the first plaintiffs in a broader group of states that sued Meta in 2023. Their case also alleges that Meta collected data on children under 13 without parental consent. The states are seeking damages and changes to the way the platforms operate. A former Meta engineering director, Arturo Bejar, told jurors that the company took what he described as a don't ask, don't tell approach to younger children on Instagram. Those are allegations and testimony, not findings by the court. The jury will have to weigh that testimony alongside Meta's defense and the other evidence presented at trial. Meta disputes the claims. Its lawyers say the company has introduced many safety features and that the evidence will show a long-standing commitment to supporting young people. The stakes go beyond one company. Similar lawsuits against major social media platforms are testing whether product design choices can create legal responsibility for harms alleged by young users, families, schools, and state governments. In Hawaii, Tropical Storm Moke is moving toward the islands after forming Friday in the Pacific. The National Hurricane Center said Saturday afternoon that Moke was about 425 miles southeast of Hilo, moving west-northwest at 12 miles an hour, with maximum sustained winds near 50 miles an hour. The biggest concern is heavy rain and gusty winds, particularly on the Big Island's windward and southeastern sides. Tropical storm effects can vary sharply by terrain and by changes in a storm's track. The storm is expected to pass south of the islands late Saturday into Sunday and continue westward nearby through early Tuesday. That timing matters because communities are still recovering from Hurricane Lala, which brought damaging winds, mud, and flooding last weekend. Forecasts can change quickly, so Hawaii residents and travelers should rely on local emergency alerts and the National Weather Service rather than this early summary. The United States and Canada have moved deeper into a trade dispute after negotiations failed. The United States imposed 50% tariffs on about $20 billion worth of Canadian products early Saturday. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canada will answer with dollar-for-dollar retaliatory measures beginning next month. The tariffs affect some goods that had previously been protected under the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, putting additional pressure on a trading relationship that supports supply chains in manufacturing, agriculture, and consumer goods on both sides of the border. That agreement had provided an important framework for cross-border commerce, making the affected exemptions especially consequential for businesses that planned around them. The immediate policy is clear, the longer-term consequences are less so. Tariffs are paid at the border by importers, and the added cost can be absorbed by companies, passed through to customers, or reflected in lower margins and altered sourcing. Canada and the United States each remain major markets for the other, which makes a prolonged escalation economically significant well beyond the products on the first tariff list. Immigration policy is also having immediate consequences in Haiti. More than 160 people arrived there Thursday on the first U.S. deportation flight after the Trump administration prevailed in court over its move to end temporary protected status for many Haitians. Haiti's migration office said the group included TPS holders and people who had served prison sentences in the United States. Temporary protected status had shielded roughly 350,000 Haitians from deportation, allowing them to live and work in the country while conditions in Haiti were deemed unsafe for return. Its end, therefore, changes both in immigration status and the immediate decisions facing a large population of people and families. Supporters of the administration say the government is enforcing immigration law after winning the legal case. Humanitarian and migrant rights groups warn that the returns send people into a country facing armed gang violence, displacement, and fragile public services. The flight marks a concrete new phase in a policy dispute that will continue in courts and in Congress. And at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, newly confirmed Director Dr. Erica Schwartz has acknowledged deep operational problems in her first large meeting with staff. Schwartz told employees that programs with congressional funding have, in some cases, become effectively dormant because the staff who ran them were laid off or remain on leave. She is the CDC's 22nd leader and its first Senate-confirmed director in nearly a year. The agency's ability to track outbreaks, support state health departments, and communicate public health guidance depends on specialists whose work is often invisible until an emergency arrives. Those functions rely on sustained staffing and coordination, not only on leadership changes during a crisis. Schwartz has pledged to restore confidence and advocacy for the Atlanta-based agency. Whether she can rebuild capacity amid ongoing staffing and policy changes will be an important public health story in the months ahead. Overseas, the standoff between Washington and Tehran remains one of the week's most consequential developments for Americans and for global energy markets. President Trump says new U.S. economic measures against Iran will be announced Monday. His administration has described the planned action as an unprecedented campaign of economic isolation, aimed at forcing Iran to accept U.S. demands related to its nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz. The announcement will provide a clearer indication of how the administration intends to turn that pressure campaign into policy. Iran's security leadership answered Saturday with threats toward neighboring countries that join the American pressure campaign. Tehran continues to dispute Washington's account of conditions in the Strait. Shipping through Hormuz has been severely disrupted during the nearly 6-month conflict, even as President Trump has said vessels are moving through. Before the conflict, the waterway carried roughly a fifth of globally traded oil and liquefied natural gas. That is why this is not simply a diplomatic argument. Uncertainty over shipping, sanctions, and military risk can reach fuel prices, insurance costs, inflation expectations, and bond markets around the world. Neither side has announced active peace talks, so Monday's sanctions announcement is a key near-term marker. Ukraine has endured another deadly wave of Russian attacks. One day after a drone strike on a shopping center in Kryvyi Rih killed at least 16 people and wounded about 130, according to Ukrainian authorities. On Saturday, Russian drone and missile strikes killed people in several Ukrainian regions, including an attack on railway infrastructure in Kyiv. Russia's defense ministry said it had struck a locomotive depot. Russian authorities also said a Ukrainian drone attack in the Krasnodar region killed 3 people, including 2 children. The competing claims cannot all be independently assessed from the battlefield, but the wider picture is clear. Attacks are reaching far from front lines and are targeting or damaging infrastructure that civilians rely on. Railway infrastructure is especially important because it supports civilian movement as well as the country's broader transport network. Ukraine says it faces a chronic shortage of Patriot interceptors for defending against ballistic missiles. France said it would accelerate air defense deliveries, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky. The attacks underscore how far the war remains from a negotiated end. Turning to money, Friday was the most recent completed U.S. trading session. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed at 53,277.1, up 517.80 points, or 0.98%. The S&P 500 finished at 7,674.37, up 33.21 points, or 0.43%. The Nasdaq Composite closed at 26,180.45, up 113.29 points, or 0.43%. Those were final Friday closes, not futures or intraday figures. The rebound trimmed losses from a turbulent week, but it did not erase them. The Dow was down 0.8% for the week, the S&P 500 down 1.4%, and the Nasdaq down 2.1%. The central story was the bond market. Investors have been weighing higher government borrowing costs, uncertainty around Iran and oil, and signs that inflation pressure could prove stubborn. Bond yields moved sharply during the week. A yield is the return investors demand to hold a bond, and higher long-term yields can raise financing costs for households, businesses, and the government, while also making stocks relatively less attractive. Friday's preliminary purchasing managers' data offered some relief. U.S. business activity accelerated in August, powered by strong services sector growth. That is encouraging for corporate revenue and employment, but it can also make investors question how quickly the Federal Reserve can lower interest rates if demand remains strong and inflation stays elevated. Ross Stores was among the notable gainers after reporting stronger quarterly profit and revenue than analysts expected. Still, the broader message from the week is that markets are looking beyond earnings. Bond yields, inflation expectations, trade policy, and the Middle East are all competing to set the next direction for stocks. In sports, men's tennis has lost its top-ranked player for the U.S. Open. Jannik withdrew Friday because he says he has not recovered from a right knee injury. Sinner won Wimbledon last month, then missed the hardcourt events in Montreal and Cincinnati. He said he had returned to the court in Monte Carlo, but needed more time before the U.S. Open main draw begins August 30th. His decision means he will not try to play through the injury at the season's final Grand Slam. The 25-year-old Italian was the 2024 U.S. Open champion and has won 6 titles this year. His absence removes one half of the recent Sinner-Carlos Alcaraz rivalry from New York. Alcaraz has said he expects to play after time away with a wrist injury. For the tournament, the withdrawal reshapes the draw and opens a significant opportunity for the rest of the field. At the BMW Championship in St. Louis, Wyndham Clark takes a 5-shot lead into Sunday's final round at Bellerive. Clark recovered from a double bogey on the opening hole Saturday with 5 birdies in an 8-hole stretch. He finished with a 5-under par 65. Rory McIlroy shot 65 and Patrick Cantlay 66 to share second place. Clark's recovery also illustrates why a sizable lead remains meaningful but not decisive over one final round. The final round has 2 layers. Clark is chasing his 3rd victory of the year after already winning the U.S. Open. For players near the FedEx Cup cutoff, Sunday is also the last chance to reach the top 30 and advance to next week's Tour Championship at East Lake in Atlanta, where every qualifying player begins with an equal chance at the FedEx Cup and its $10 million prize. A quick check of notable results from Friday: the New York Jets beat the Pittsburgh Steelers 17-0 in preseason football. The Carolina Panthers defeated the Jacksonville Jaguars 34-17 in a game called with 2 minutes remaining because of lightning. In baseball, the Los Angeles Dodgers edged the Pittsburgh Pirates 5-4. The Seattle Mariners beat the Chicago Cubs 6-5 in 10 innings. And the New York Yankees topped the Toronto Blue Jays 3-1. We'll close with entertainment news. Actor Hayden Panettiere, known for Heroes in Nashville, has died at 36. Police said Panettiere was found unresponsive in an apartment in Greenville, South Carolina last Sunday afternoon. First responders attempted life-saving measures and she was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities said an autopsy found no signs of trauma and officers found no signs of foul play. No cause of death has been announced and the investigation remains open. That means authorities have released preliminary information but have not established a public cause of death. Panettiere began working as a child and became widely known as Claire Bennett in Heroes, then as Juliette Barnes in Nashville. Her film work included Remember the Titans, the Scream franchise, and the voice role of Dot in A Bug's Life. She had also spoken publicly and written about alcohol addiction, depression, and postpartum depression. The news has prompted tributes from colleagues and fans while investigators continue to establish what happened. That is your Sunday briefing. We'll continue watching the Iran sanctions announcement, Hawaii's storm, the U.S. Canada trade response, the Ukraine war, and the final round at Bellerive. Please follow Artificially Intelligent News and share this briefing with one person who would value a calm morning news summary. I'm Mark Ellison. Thanks for listening, and take care.